Good afternoon, Central Coast. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. I am your host, Melanie Blankenship, sitting alongside my good friend. Hopefully, we will announce that he will be a co-host, but he's got to decide that. Josh Carmichael Environmental. Hello, Josh.
Hello again.
I'm super excited. We changed it up a little bit. As you can see, he's not sitting across from me. He's sitting next to me, so you guys can see our faces and have the full concept of who we are and who we're talking to. We're talking to you, the community. We are enticing. We are here to stimulate the conversation of food, family, farming, and home. Home always being the Central Coast of California. I am the representative of the North County. He is a representative of the Coastal County. So, you got a title now, Josh. So, we are here to have the conversation of all that entails in that topics of food, family, farming, and home. Well, what is each one of them? Food is that conversation piece because it is the only thing that you and I both have to have to survive, right? But it needs to be nourishing. It needs to be environmentally friendly. It needs to be all of these things. And it hasn't been as easy as it is to say these words. So this is where this conversation is stimulating those. And then family. We're all family, aren't we, Josh? I mean, we've been close friends for a long time. So doesn't that make us family?
That's right.
We don't need to be blood to be family. We have family in this community, no matter if you are. I consider Miguel already family. And, here he is putting this awesome studio together so we can put this show on. And farming, well, let's talk about that because that is a conversation that is continuously needing to happen. I cannot get the phone calls anymore of, I don't think I'm going to farm anymore. I'm getting a lot of those phone calls and they're devastating. The people that are the ones that are doing this, and have been doing this of constant, I don't have anybody to carry this on. Do you know anybody, Mel? Do you know anybody that's willing to take this on? Or I get, hey, I just bought this new property and it's got, I think, olives and fruit trees or flowers or something on it. What do I do with this? Please don't tear it out. That's all I'm going to say first and foremost. Just don't tear it out. Let us figure it out together. I'm here, but I'm also asking for help. We need to have this conversation because these are those three questions just this week that I've gotten so much of. And that's what I'm going to stimulate the conversation here, Josh. And, I want your insight. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of those, help me with these because I love,
looking at issues where we kind of say the problem is the solution.
Yep.
With that, I think you kind of answer that question. You're like, if, you need help, who do you call? You call your family.
Yep.
And if we're really all there for each other in this community, really the scale of our towns, we really can, know each other and help each other in all kinds of ways, economically, socially, environmentally. So I think that, calling on everyone, to play their role. And I know we talked last time about getting older, so getting towards the auntie and uncle titles maybe. But I know that can be sensitive sometimes. So, I got some aunties, we got to call them cousins still.
Yeah, I'm not.
But,
I'm not sensitive
like
to
you said, thanks to Cousin Miguel for putting on the show. And everyone kind of fills in their roles and can do the duties that need to be done. If the elders need, younger, stronger backs for something and they have the knowledge to pass on, that becomes a really win-win kind of reciprocal thing. So if people could look to rely on each other a lot more, I was kind of thinking about coming in here and where, I get my food, where I get my clothes, where I get, all the materials we deal with every day, for construction and for, building things out. It just really, we depend on each other a lot, so I really love having, all my friends, businesses that we can team up with and really connect and then help neighbors, divide and conquer, all the things that they want to, do or build out and enjoy here. So
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here because, the reason is because, okay, so I do these questions out that I've received and I've, multiple not just from one person versus another. But the biggest concept is in these questions that I'm really honing in on is the fact of the matter is, and I'm going to ask you this question, answer it honestly. Is there not the people out there anymore that are willing to do the grunt work? Meaning, where are our people? Where's our weeders? Where's our harvesters? Where's our truck drivers? Where are, you want me to keep going? Because honestly, like the calls that I'm getting are, if I had the employment, if I could afford the employment, if the employment showed up, I don't think I would be throwing in the hat as quickly as I am. But Melanie, in order to keep this farm going, I have to get out there and sell. But if I don't have product to sell, what am I doing?
Yeah, I think labor has been a big bottleneck in the last several years. Materials became difficult through COVID, and we saw all these supply chains break down in other ways. And now, looking at things more regionally, I think that labor has been a really hard issue in so many industries, especially the harder working industries. And so I think that the labor is out there, but it's sort of disguised in different, forms. And I think that there needs to be sort of a value to what those bring. A lot of people that come to me, they want experience, they want to learn, through the trades, and I'm able to help them sign their license and start their own businesses. So there's still, some line there, but I run into a lot of labor issues. And I think that, it really needs to be shown that there's maybe a path to, ownership or entrepreneurship through putting in those lower level things and gaining the experience that's needed to run something. I'm not sure where, all the demographics are looking, if the youth don't want to get dirty or what it is exactly happening. But
you said it. I did it. He said it. But at the same time, you're right. Like, okay, but at the end,
it's there, but I don't know what's the response.
Can I ask you something? When you started your first job, I started mine at 14 years old. I worked at the Black Oak Motel with my grandma. Right? I'm going to be honest. I mean, I worked for a family business too, just filing papers, whatever. But my actual first paycheck came from the Black Oak Motel. I went to work there because that was the option that I had at that time. Yes, my grandma was a boss, but at the same time, I didn't think I was going to do this job because I was going to have ownership or that I was going to be the next executive at the Black Oak Motel. I didn't do that job, but I knew at that stage of my life that I needed to make money. I wanted my freedom to be able to make money, and I wanted to be able to have that freedom of making money, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
That's where I'm just sharing my experience on this. And honestly, with my children too, like that was the biggest thing. Like, yes, I have given you experiences and knowledge that you could step into your own business. I mean, I have a child that knows every end of wood business, right? Cutting wood, splitting wood, selling wood. He knows all the permits. He knows all the insurance. He knows transportation. He knows weights. He knows all of that, right? I have a daughter that knows how to run a retail store and a full commercial kitchen. You want to talk health code? Talk health code with Savannah. Experienced in it, yes. But I also still made them go out. They need to do grunt work. I'm not going to let them just because step into that role. Just like my grandma, you're not going to step in that role. You're going to do it.
You want to earn those, kind of titles because, if you don't put that time in, you just really don't have that appreciation for what it takes or who is doing that role for you. If you were to, be a type of boss or your own boss. And I think that, it seems a little generational. When I was a kid, I started working. I was 15, started working in restaurants, and I just did what I did. I sold ladies' shoes in Nordstrom. I did all these different jobs. And then when I started my own business, I was able to lean on all of that experience. I had, sales experience. I had, hardworking experience through that. I had a lot of personal skills through, being in the kind of retail sales end of things. So I think that, you don't necessarily know where that's leading you to, but putting in that kind of work and just having, things like, work ethic or, just kind of knowing what it's like to be in a certain role or certain industries or, the position like there's some old restaurants like the Chart House that would start everyone a dishwasher before they could be a manager.
Yeah,
And,
steps.
there's
You have to go
reasons
with
to not
steps.
skip a lot of those steps. And I think that, I think that there are paths to more and more jobs now. And that's kind of I was looking at is like, you want to come out and you want to work with, one of our grazing contractors now, and be a grazer. You want to be around animals. So there's a lot of ways that, you have paths into, the trades or into industries and ag where, it's not as formal of education always. But I think that, they got to see some kind of light, through the trees that.
So let me share
Get
something
in
really
there.
funny. So on
Let's hear it.
Thursday, I was invited to the Cuesta College Job Fair. And so
Okay.
I was down there. And I'll be honest with you, I was representing Creston Valley Meats, and
Yeah.
we're hiring a, HACCP coordinator, which I actually just hired somebody, and I'm excited because, he had no knowledge of HACCP and I'm training him, and he's doing really good because he has the want, right? Like that's all I needed I needed somebody that had the want. But I still did the job fair because I committed, and I, just because we have one, that doesn't mean that's it, right? Like I feel like I constantly need to keep planting these seeds and managing and doing things, right? So attended the fair representing Creston Valley Meats, and I'm in there with like right next to me. They were manufacturer of drones for surveillance systems.
Wow.
I had San Luis Ambulance. I had San Luis County Unified School Districts, like all these big big systems,
Industrial,
big employment. There was another surveillance system, Cal Fire, California Highway Patrol.
Sure.
Just like all these, executive kind of jobs, right? But they were all hiring, all of them.
Yeah.
And I was like in this big old auditorium with all these places that are hiring. And I was sad a little bit in the sense of the numbers of humans that were walking through there looking for jobs.
Seemed low.
It seemed really low.
Yeah.
For the amount of
Effort
people.
that was put out.
Yes. And the Cuesta put on this beautiful event. But then, people came up to me because of course I have, everybody had their TV screens and their perfect posters. I had a piece of fabric that had chickens on it, and so everybody was like, what's this? And I was able to have the conversation about farming first, right? Like, before we got into the discussion of what
Processing,
what I did. And then of course nobody knew what HACCP is. By the way, it's Hazardous Analysis Critical Control Point. Everything about our new world is about acronyms. And so, of course nobody knew what that was. But out of the handfuls of people that came, there was 3 children that came up to us. They were 1-2 year into Cuesta. And Cuesta's awesome because you have a wide range of ages of people that are in their school.
Yeah,
but
great institutions.
but the youth, there was three, okay,
Okay.
that
Top
were
3.
that actually had experience in something agriculture. There was quite a few that walked up that are majoring in agriculture,
Okay.
right? Either ag business, ag science. These are their majors with hopes to go into Cal Poly or Davis. One of them wants to be a small animal vet. One of them wanted to be, there was
So
just
not coming from the family farm necessarily.
not coming from the family farms. These were
Yeah.
people that dreamed of being in agriculture, which I loved, right? They
Yeah.
had the want, right? They had the want. But, 3 of these people that actually knew basic animal knowledge, and that was it. And I was taken back a little bit in the sense of, did we, here I'm getting these phone calls, right? I'm getting these phone calls of fellow farmers, good friends, competitors, but I don't consider any competitor anymore a
Yeah, it's your
competitor.
network, yeah.
Those are my allies anymore because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like the regulations, all the things that we're dealing with. It's like, come on, we have to talk with them business. There's trade secrets we don't need to share, but we need to talk because no matter who you think you are, you're going to get it just like we are. Okay.
Well, nobody knows what you're going through like someone who's
No.
doing the same thing.
No.
Those are usually great network groups that
Yes.
I've found in my
And
experience.
so that's where I'm like, where, right? Like, what the heck? Like, we have all these people that are struggling for the same things. They're wanting to, not continue these long businesses because they cannot find help or they can't get experience help. They can't find the balance to keep the farm going, to get out there and train people.
Mm-hmm.
But we have institutions that are saying they're educating or institutions that are, stimulating the, our workforce. But where? Like, what happened to this disconnect? Where did this happen at? Where there's not the experiences of people that are getting dirty. Like, where's the knowledge of pulling weeds? You and I know it's not just about pulling a weed. You have to identify what it is before you pull that weed. Or, watering. There was another place that was hiring, and they're needing people that can run weed whips and water. Like, they need entry-level jobs, right? This is what they consider entry-level jobs. And they're like, basic watering, weed whipping. And they're like, oh, that's easy. And I chimed in. I said, have you ever watered a plant before? And they looked at me and they're like, well, no, how hard can it be? I'm like, actually, it's not as easy as you think about it, because do you water the plant or do you water the soil? And then the gentleman, he was a super cool kid. He looked at me and goes, well, you have to water the plant. The plant needs water. I'm like, actually, no. The soil needs water, not the plant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just...
Well, you can't water at the trunk and expect everything to go there. The roots are reaching out through the surrounding soil, searching for it. There's a lot of, I would say art and science that go into, all things that we do. And you can explain it through the art filter or the science filter.
Yep.
And it gets to the same place. But experience is really that lacking key thing. And I think that, the workforce has been all over the place. So many new kind of high-tech sector things have happened in the last few decades. And so much labor has really, been outsourced through, different, kind of groups. So there's sort of a disconnect from that lineage of who's coming up and being able to do problem solving and finding, kind of managerial ranks. You might have, some real basic labor pools, but we did miss something in that interim that we really are missing, that management group. And a lot of it is, kind of this double-edged sword. The high-tech sector has really hurt us in ways where in education, the kids are just learning to push different buttons every time, they go through these new higher and higher tech things, and they're losing skills like critical thinking, problem solving. They're losing really those types of things. Why
does education have to be push the button or write it? Can't we just go out and get dirty anymore? Can't we just put the school back out in the field?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of models like that. Someone was just promoting a one room schoolhouse again. And so the kids are out there learning to solve problems while they're doing something for the animals on the farm or for, whatever their, kind of outdoor education looks like. And yeah, real world problems are really where it's at. I remember my kids growing up just really wanting to do whatever we're doing. If I was in the kitchen, they're in the kitchen. If I was in the garden, they're in the garden. If I have power tools, these 2-year-olds have power tools doing things. So, it was really great just to see that, that's that natural curiosity that's there, and they kind of run through and they learn a lot of skills. But I think less time with people at home. It's an entire cultural breakdown.
It is.
And so, that's where we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what do we want to support? And I was listening to something that you said recently just about protesting. And I was like, wow, I really was so happy that we're on the same page that way, because it's like, I'm always saying lately, it's like, hey, it's great to gather. It's great to have the ability to really stand up. But it's like, I don't want to hear what you're against. I want to hear what you're for. What are you standing up for?
Exactly.
Why are you here? And then how do you make solutions happen so that you're not just complaining about?
And if you're against it,
understand
else's. The steps in preventing what you're against continuing to happen. Like, that's where I'm so incredibly strong. No matter who you are, what you are, how you vote, how you breathe, religion, whatever, it doesn't matter. So if you stand strong on something that is wrong, how do you see the ability to stand there with a sign and not be able to talk about it and be able to explain what it is wrong that you see, and a way to get us together so we can work as an army to fix it? And that's honestly, again, I think a little bit of this protest conversation is, okay, so most of the people that I've talked to that are protesting Trump's immigration policy, right?
Sure.
So total respect, because yes, it is a show. And so I agree.
Disrupting a lot of families and
disrupting.
communities
It
and
is chaos.
heavy-handed
Do
way.
we know there is a problem? Yes, there is a problem. And there are people here that are clearly taking advantage of our system. But there are a lot of people that are here, bettering our system, bettering our organization. And I personally know of many that have gone through paperwork process, trying to do the right thing. I know experience from back in Clinton time, right? Clinton's immigration policy to Bush's policy to Obama's policy to Trump's, Biden's, and back to Trump's. Like, I've gone through immigration policies with so many humans that we're trying to do the right thing, but our system hasn't been right in a long time. We've had the green card. We've had the H2 program. Like, we have too many broken systems. But you know why? Because we're too disconnected as a society.
Sure.
We are afraid to talk about this conversation. And yes, I'm going to sit here and talk about my half-breed lifestyle because I am. I am a gringo and I'm a Mexican. I am proud of both cultures, but I also understand for the longest time I'm just going to put it out there. I had a gringo grandmother who thought my grandma was only there supposed to be cleaning houses. Right?
Yeah.
I had it growing up, and I had it
in the family.
Yes. Yeah. And then my other grandma didn't really like my gringo, grandma, but at the same time there was me. They both loved me. Yeah. And they both wanted to share their cultures. They both wanted to share their lifestyles with me. And I took it from both sides. Do I sit here and stand as a victim? No. I sit here going, okay, yeah, this is it. How do I make this better? I stood firm about knowing what was right and wrong, and you're not going to discriminate against each other. If you love me, you're going to work with me because you don't have to like each other. Right? You don't have to, but there's got to be some mutual respect.
You don't have to like half the people you love.
Exactly. No, I mean, that's true. But there's me. Yeah. And you guys both really love me. You want me to be a part of your life. Then how do we move forward in this? Right? I mean, this is family, right? But this is how we need to move forward as a society. There's laws. There's, we can't fix things federally. This is what I'm saying. Like, yes, Trump's policy is shaking the rug. It is literally, so aggressively shaking that we're all flying in the atmosphere wondering where we're going to land, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, something needs to be fixed. But at the same time, as the rug has been shaken, why aren't we as a community getting together and writing out policies that would best suit our systems? And the reason why I'm saying this also is, do people not realize we're American? What is the possibilities of an American? We have communities, we have cities, we have states, and then we have federal. There's a reason why we have 50 states. There's a reason why we have county ordinances versus city ordinances. There's things that we can do. Yes, the policies in which the federal government overrides everything if we allow it to, but we can get policy in hands that are the way that it's going to work for those societies and those communities. And we can't forget about our wonderful neighbors, the Indians. There's a lot to be said about a sovereign nation. And I declare myself a sovereign nation.
The people that have been here.
You don't have to abide by no rules.
Yeah.
Except your own, So people need to understand the systems of economics, systems of the way that govern rules.
Well, and I think it all falls in through, how we act socially or culturally. Like nothing's going to, the policies that are happening today, and I kind of look at it too with America, my grandma came over here on a boat. And so, my family's only been here how many generations in the last, 100 years then. And so it really is something that we have to see how we've really created America as this melting pot in this place that is sort of experimental over the world of bringing the most cultures together. They're looking at all these scientists trying to leave, the country now. Maybe 75% of the professionals are looking for jobs in other countries that are stimulating, the education and the grants and the things that they can really do. Mm-hmm. And that's how America became such a superpower, is that Germany shut down in the 30s. and was kicking out any Jewish scientist, anyone involved in things, and they all came here.
They can
created.
They can take the scientists back that created methabromine, methamphetamines. They can take the scientists back that created glyphosate. They can. Do you want me to keep going? That all the technologies that came out of Germany during that time.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's all these things that created. Yeah, like we got the atomic bomb from that, and we got the space system. So there's so many things that happen, but so many of our Nobel Prize winners or Nobel Prize winners have been immigrants, and so the country is built on those things. And we had already a mixed culture of people that were settled here on top of the native cultures and nations. And so we have to look at how can we get along socially. So we can't really look at and say Trump's policies are terrible if we're not going to live that way. If you're not embracing what your culture is regionally, like for me, I learned Spanish before English because my neighbor, little grandma Abuelita, would take care of me all the time. And so my mom would come home. I've eaten beans and tortillas. Yeah, I've used it my whole life. Every job I've ever had, I've needed it, and I love the people, the culture, the food. And you have to speak Spanish just to say the town that you live in.
Well, look at me.
So, I mean, it's part of our culture.
Grandparents
California.
That refused to let me learn how to speak Spanish because I was an American. My Mexican family said, no, that you are American. You're not Mexican. You speak English. And I giggle because I learned, I can understand a lot of it, but I still struggle to speak it. But, I got all the bad words down like nobody's business. But
that's a tough cultural moment.
But that's culture again. But at the same time, I learned it because, my grandparents used to speak it when they didn't want us to know anything, So, we learned it that way. But yes, culture.
So, you got to look at where you're at regionally. And I think that model flows so well, whether you're talking about economics or you're talking about the people and the social structure and you're talking about your environment, because you have something related to each other.
Yep.
You're all from this region of, the planet. And so, I think really embracing what we have here in agriculture and in all of this being a Mexican state and a Spanish state and, indigenous states, that there's so much knowledge through this all that there's not any one way that we can go without each other.
No.
And I think that's kind of the moment we're at. And so if we can really look at each other as neighbors, like you said, and family across, bloodlines, across, cultures, across things, we can really start to settle this place. I think that we have not really settled this place well as Americans because of the guilt of really killing everyone that knew how to live here. 98% of Chumash, relatives are gone. My friends from those tribes tell me it's just like, they had to be underground. You couldn't speak, your language. You couldn't bring things out, right? And that's kind of the one tough thing with American Dreams. Like, come here, make money, be prosperous. But then it's like, oh, you can't do that in the street. You can't wear that. You can't do this. So if we're not going to speak up and really defend our neighbors, ourselves here, then, we're never going to change those policies at the top. It's never going to come from the top down. It has to come from the bottom up. And so the more we can do together to really, put all of our resources, together, I think that's where we're going to see essentially prosperity.
Right.
And abundancy come back. And so a lot of that's around food because so many other cultures haven't lost it.
Nope.
Because they didn't depend on science the way that we did. Even Europe went, the way of organics in the 20s and split from America. And America went down this synthetic road. And now here we are within 100 years saying, oh, that didn't work, or we're on a treadmill. And then all these other countries have been doing it for centuries.
Trump's policy, I was giggling because I watch trade all the time, right? I get a report every morning because I want to know what to grow.
Commodities.
Because I always grow against where the market is, because it's like, the market's going to be flooded. The niche is always going to be outside of that market. So I watch it just for that. And everything lately has been, well, Europe doesn't want this and, doesn't want this. And it's like, well, they're trying to negotiate, but then you read between the fine lines and it's crazy because it's like, it frustrates me a little because it's like, oh, Europe doesn't want chicken. But yet, why do they not want chicken from the United States? Because of the chemicals that are used in that chicken, they've outlawed it, right? Yeah. But yet, here in California, we've outlawed everything beyond what Europe has outlawed.
Yeah, we're a good cutting edge
but yet we're getting it. So I'm like, why do we have the regulation? And Europe, just because they're on the trade negotiations right now, they get to put their foot down and say, I'm not getting it because you're selling me salmonella rich, filled with chemical chicken.
Yeah.
We don't want it. Why can't California, if we're going to be so, anti this and anti that in California, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that environmentally friendly stuff, why can't we just not say we don't want contaminated, chemically rich food? Can we have what California can grow?
We should really look at what like Italy has done, what Japan has done, because their food's so sovereign to them and their culture. You couldn't break those apart.
Nope.
And there's so many great examples out around the world. The Cook documentary that Michael Pollan did was really amazing. That just helped me really look at food again. The way you saw where America went, and again went to this chemical laden thing, thinking that Wonder Bread was a miracle, the best thing, but it took all the air pockets out of bread, and that's the only health in our bread products is what they can bring in, through the ambient air and bacteria.
Do people even know what ricin is? That stuff is toxic.
Yeah. So
and we wonder why we have the health issues that we have. And the sad thing is like just to even look at understanding now. So people are going to start hearing sell-by dates. They're going to start hearing the change of, what is a sell-by date? What is an actual, expiration date? There is policy being written federally right now and the state to get rid of sell-by dates and expiration dates. And the reason is because Wall Street is losing so much money on people, not buying things because it has too short of a sell-by date or the food loss, there's a lot of buyback programs that people don't know about in the Grocery Store Manufacturing Association. They have buyback programs where if you don't sell it, they have to take it back and carry the loss.
Shrink other things.
Please understand, I'm an independent. I don't have those. I'm too small. I don't make that much. Incentives tax wise to be able to get that. But your Albertsons, your Trader Joe's,
I've worked in those industries and seen it. Yeah.
Those guys don't have loss. They have, incentivized where they get buyback programs or payoff
or donation write-offs and things.
Yeah, but they actually get it in a form of different ways.
Yeah, subsidized
through credit card terminals and things like that. So
that's why they like institutionalized food and things because then they get their money back.
They get their money back. The buyback program in fluid milk, that's gross. But anyways, long story short in all of this, you're going to start seeing things have longer shelf lives. You're going to start seeing things have, no sell-by dates, right? And it's people are you going to question this? You need to, because what changed? What took that whole milk product, right? That liquid milk product and allowed it to not have a sell-by date. I'm just using that as an example. Do people not have, if we don't have people that know how to get dirty, how are they going to understand what chemical was just used in your milk to make sure that it doesn't ever go bad?
Yeah.
You're going to have a fluid milk in your refrigerator for months and it's never going to go bad. People are going to think they got the deal of the lifetime, aren't they? But are they never going to question what just took place in order to make that happen?
Yeah. Well, I think, we really have to look at the basics and start there again. If we really aren't happy with our culture or our government, we have to invest our time, our energy, and our money into the things we believe in. And I think that food is really that great political vehicle that we can, touch on in all ways. Because look at some of the biggest things that came out of the first 100 days of Trump, complaints wise, was like eggs are prices going up, groceries cost more. People, it's just one of those essential things. It's part of our basic drive. We have to eat. We have to reproduce. We have to have, shelter and be merry. But other than that, it really is just something where if we can look at our food, I think we can unravel the mystery of what you're talking about because it's so complex. Like that conversation we just got into was like starting to blow up my brain because I was like,
welcome to my mind.
No, I mean, what a dilemma of a huge proportion. And it's like, how do we get through that when you're carrying something up here? And it's sort of like in permaculture, again, we'll like to say, you start up as high in the watershed as you can and you do the smallest things first.
Yep.
So if you can touch things at the smallest magnitude of order, by the time they get to the biggest order, like a stream, all the little, creeks come down. And by the time they get to the bottom, the river is a big roaring thing. And like LA, they're like, let's deal with the river in town. And you're like, wow, you probably should deal with it on the hills that you know don't manage the water on, so then they burn, and it's just such a dilemma where people keep looking past the beginning point.
Just keep
If you
the
want to
bucket.
keep the hills from burning, you have to manage and touch the hills. You have to be the ones that go out there and you do it with fire if you're that smart and had that technology that the natives had. We're not even smart enough. We have to fight fire. They used fire. I mean, how can you say that, you know, we really evolved? But I think that you got to look at where you're at
you
and how to do
riled.
those things regionally.
I got you riled up.
I am. I could go all day. I mean,
and welcome to why this show is important to me. And the reason
think
is
so.
because I want to throw out what just came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like literally like.
Yeah, how are we processing this life together? Because we're neighbors in the same place. So
Exactly.
our conversation could be a microcosm of what everyone's talking about. And how do we get enough gathering or enough sort of efforts around each other? You know, I was really happy. I was at a surf night at the Film Fest on the Fremont on Friday.
Lucky.
And got some free tickets to my pops. And so we got to go down there and hang out, watch the band, watch the movies. And there was a kid there that I had met through one of our foraging events we did recently. And he's like, hey, I heard your podcast the other day. And I was like, get it. I was like, how great that, you know, it had reach already within town. So, you know, meeting each other. And that's the scale that I love, where you do something here locally, you produce it, and then you get to go out and you get to, you know, get feedback and involvement with your neighborhood. And that's kind of where I think if we just start caring for each other, caring for the earth, like these are some basic principles in permaculture, but just things that I think we could agree on. And if we just allow ourselves to get back to something basic, like getting dirty, you know, getting our own food growing, and really starting at that point, how does that affect us individually? And then how does that radiate and affect, you know, more of our groups, you know, friends, families, and neighbors? And so I think that with that, we would really solve a lot of issues, whether it's fuel, you know, cost and issues, keeping things on a more regional scale. We can, you know, develop things that work for this area. How our energy is produced, you know, is better for certain areas to do certain types of, you know, systems. So I really think that if we want to be smart, or we want to say we're something, there's an evolution point here.
Yep.
I think there's a jumping off point, and we maybe stopped because we didn't know what to tell the kids to do exactly. So the kids are all just backing up. Nobody's really jumping off. You know, when I started my own business, I was 22 and I just wanted to change the world. And I was like, look, I'm not going to work for the man anymore. I'm going to do whatever I think is right. And it took me a few years to figure out, like, fine, I'll pay taxes. Fine, I'll get licensed. Fine, I'll do these
And my problem
regulated
is
things. But, you know, you jump off the cliff. So we're just not maybe going forward as a community that communicates with each other because we've gotten so abstract. And maybe
my thing is I've never wanted to change the world. I'm not that person, right?
Sure.
I don't want
Would
to.
you want to improve
Josh,
improve people's lives?
I don't want to change you.
No,
okay?
but I
don't
mean, do you want to
I don't want
improve
to change
things
Miguel. I want
around you.
I want there to be, if you have the desire to want to be a part of something, you want to see something grow, I want to support these people in watching it grow. And I think that's also where I'm coming from with this conversation, because I have, you know, the retail, or, you know, this direct connect with people that I have, right? It's either, you know, selling my goods, or being out in the community,
Love me or hate me.
love me or hate me, volunteering, doing this kind of stuff, right? Like I have this connection, and I hear all of this, you know, and I take the time to listen, right? I'm listening to these people share their concerns, share their comments. But then I have this other side of me that is the business, the bulldog. I'm going to make some money, and I'm going to protect these businesses that I make money with, right? Like, you know, I eat from these farms. So to me, it's like, it's not just making money, it's survival for me as well. But, you know, hearing these things from the people, and then hearing these consumers and their concerns. And I'm like, why are you concerned when these guys, but wait, why are you going out of business? Wait, you know what I mean? Like, how do I draw this in? But then I have, you know, these people saying, okay, well, I didn't know he wasn't legal, or, you know, we had the paperwork going. How do I stay focused on all of that when they're not even having any people that are American born come to work for them?
Yeah, what a breakdown some of these systems are going to take.
Knowledge to be able to carry this on.
Yeah.
And then I'm having another side of this.
Yeah, what if the food doesn't get made?
How
you know,
about-
who's going to eat?
How about another side of this is the fact that a couple weeks ago, I shared this last week on the show, is a couple weeks ago, I had a meeting with APHIS, their state level vets from FSIS, which is Food Security Inspection Services. So there's multiple higher ups that are retiring right now and or taking the golden handshake, which are being, because funding is being cut, they're taking, how do you retire when funding's getting cut? But anyways, they're being forced into this. So that knowledge is now leaving. People are like, oh, this is good because there's not going to be these people that are out there regulating, right? But yet the knowledge of what this system is gone. They're leaving.
Damn,
and
if you did.
yeah, I know. And this is where I'm saying it's like, if we don't start right now as a community and really start talking about land use, water use, environmental impacts. I mean, these are all things that we've all been paying for how many years?
Yeah.
And where are they? Where are the
Well, if we
regulators?
don't start self-governing, we don't really have a voice to really speak with. And that's kind of the point, when, the human psyche has not evolved past the village system.
Nope.
I kind of learned that in urban ecology class in colleges. Like, you can't really see past what you can cause or who you can meet or run into. And social permaculture, they say you can only know about a couple hundred people. If you have a big mouth, maybe a few hundred like us. But I think if, you get to really, see why does Capitol Hill act the way it does? Because that's the size of the village. There's only who shows up there. And we can't represent 1 million, 10 million, all these different jurisdictions. You can't talk to everyone in that point. So the bigger it gets, the harder. Same with corporations. The bigger they get, the more faceless, the more kind of unscrupulous they get, because the money isn't staying in a region that they can see the results from how much they have. And so I think that that's the scale we have to look at. So if we're upset with the government, we have to self-govern better. We can't just go and complain and say we don't want this and then sit back and not be part of these conversations like you're saying. And I think that you are able to dictate and drive the market when you have enough consumer, kind of coherence or confidence.
So that you
But
hit
how do you do that? And it's how do we communicate these things? But it's really, how have these older cultures maintained that? They've been doing it through celebrating their culture. Yep. What do we do in Italy? You have basil festival, you have tomato festival, you have sardine festival, anchovy festival. There's just so many ways that.
But you also don't have Wall Street.
Celebrate.
Wall Street so invested in all of those. Every community that you
America has gone down a certain path.
Yes.
I think America needs to appreciate that.
Marketing.
Well, we've
everything.
gone down what Donald Trump has become. He is a face and a poster child of America looking in the mirror, unfortunately, right? He's all these things that, most of us say we don't want to be, or, in ways. And it's like, we've really substituted money as a new religion.
Yep.
So we have to look at what is sacred to us anymore. And I feel like almost everything's lost its sacredness, where you look at certain cultures and tribes. Here it was like everything was sacred. They're like, this is our sacred mountain that we came from. This is why this animal's sacred. And this, because they're all part of the system. If you're good to everything below you, you can sort of sit at the top and harvest. And that's where humans need to sit, and understand. And if we need to put it in those terms, like I always say, like economically, social, environmental, do you want to talk in dollars and cents? Do you want to talk in birds and butterflies? Do you want to talk in
Yes.
pigs and grapes? It really.
And emus.
Yeah, and emus. That's right. We got to see those baby pictures.
You want to know their names?
Oh, let's hear them.
Lemu and Doug
Oh, nice.
from Nationwide.
Are they going to grow up and sell insurance?
Oh, I'm going to dress my emu up, and it's going to walk around on the farm with me. And so, yes, I have 2 baby emus named Lemu and Doug, and I am super excited. They're 2.5 weeks old. I shared with Josh that, I have 2 baby emus at home. Yes, my husband, I think, was going to lose his mind. But
hey, whatever keeps you sane over there,
you know what I've realized, Josh, is I have too much love to share. It's kind of suffocating, so I might as well do it with plants and animals. Since my children are all getting too big, and they're like, Mom, I'm good, Mom. And I'm like, okay, but I have all this
Where
love.
does this go?
I can't bring babies home anymore, so I'm bringing baby animals
and you
home.
want grandbabies yet, so you're right in that dilemma.
I know, and I'm not pressuring, because I want that.
One day.
My daughter her love is 4-legged.
There you go.
So no, that's not happening.
Yeah, well, and so much, for me, plants has been a huge part of my life. Like I said, I just wanted to get plants in people's lives in meaningful ways, because how do we, use those things around us? That's what everything comes back down to over and over again. And I think there's so many ways to commodify the things that we need in life, and how to kind of put money. Like I've started looking at, less and less grant and sort of government funding things, and more community, like private funding.
Yep.
Because if people can't say they want to put their money towards something, like who are we doing it for?
Exactly.
You know, and I think that people need to understand we're not just trying to fix the environment only for the birds and butterflies. We're trying to do it for all of us together.
Yep.
And if there are birds and butterflies, that means there are also fish. There are also things that, you know, we can start to participate in the environment.
How about
in
the
ways
things we don't
want
even
to.
know about yet still? Like I'm crazy because it's like, you know, I'm talking, you know, I was out at the store on Saturday with customers and I'm trying to teach them, you know, how to understand soil in order to get their plants to produce, right? Remember, guys, I keep teaching this. Your soil is the life of the plant. That is where
Blood meal, bone meal.
That's where your endocrine system. That's where your heart is. That's where your lungs. That's everything
put
in your
vitamins,
body.
to take and grow
the
better.
Soil is for that plant, right? That plant. Everything above that plant is reproductive. So if things aren't going right in the soil, the reproductive is going to be a little off. And reproductive has to happen in order for you to get your tomatoes, your peppers, your
It's sort of like Western medicine. When you look at just that end result, you're like, you need to look at the holistic.
You got to look at it
picture,
at the whole picture. And, you know, as I'm teaching this, I'm also teaching about microorganisms. I'm teaching about understanding what is a beneficial insect, right?
Yeah. You love tomatoes, and you better love some bugs.
Right. But why does my tomatoes have aphids? You know, understanding that there's too much sugar. You know, I'm talking about this in terms so people can understand that when you are growing and eating wholesome food, your own food, it's not just about that. It's understanding your own body to understand what that plant is growing. Do you want just to fill it with a bunch of crack cocaine as a nitrogen fertilizer,
Miracle
right?
Grow or something.
Miracle Grow, right? Like that's what you're doing to that plant. It's the same thing. Do you do that to your own body? Like I'm trying to put that bigger perspective into understanding it's not just, I just went and bought this. How about what are you buying and what are you doing? Take responsibility for your purchases and what you're doing so that it doesn't break it down and make it harder for you to heal.
We need more Bert Wilsons in this world. He used to be great where you'd go out there and if you had plants from another nursery, he'd like look in and be like, those look unstable as hell. Who grew those plants?
Those are addicted. Did you know those are addicted? Oh my God. Okay, so Bert Wilson is, and look at us. I mean, is one of those humans that comes into your life and that if you are understanding and wanting to be a part of the environment, like Josh and I obviously had, Las Politas Nursery.
Yeah, Las Politas Native Nursery.
Las Politas Native Nursery was
.com or something.
Yeah,
He's a great.
was built by Bert, and to understand that man was like, you know, and or when he actually had patience and love for you, what he was able to teach us was like no other.
Yeah.
And, you know, I will never forget when I drove up in the van.
Let's hear a Bert story.
Yeah, man. And I was picking up plants and it was like June. I mean, he was kicking rocks at me. He was spitting on me. And
Get out of here. It's too hot.
Yeah. He was like, you're an idiot for buying these plants at this time. Why would you plant this right now? That is like such a waste of water. And get it. I mean, he was, and I'm like, hi, Bert. How are you?
Love you.
Love you, buddy. He's like, you know, and he still did it because he knew he had to for the business. I had to for the client that would not say no, right?
I worked up here last summer through July, which it was
awful.
Not what I tried to do. I tried to be out by June 1 for sure.
But I mean, but just that knowledge. And sadly, he is no longer on this earth. He is a spirit in the atmosphere now. And he lives on through his daughter, Penny, who's carrying it on. And I'm super excited. And to understand California natives, LasPolitasNursery.com or just Google Las Politas.
The website,
Read that website. I am so proud of Penny keeping everything. She's upgraded it, but she's kept all of him there.
The content. I mean, he was a guy that was like, and this is what I was going to say before is like, you know, having all those different jobs, it made me have sort of that, you know, integrated abilities and learning, you know, of things that would come up in business separately. And so it's like he was such an integrated person where he's not just a scientist where he studied chemistry, that he was also a fireman. So then he was really out there in the brush and knowing the conditions and the systems. And then he became, you know, a nurseryman where he could put it all together. And, you know, he would have that tough love, but he would give you love and time.
Tons of it.
We would unload trucks with him like 5,000 plants at a time. So we had 4 hours straight with just Bert telling you stuff. Then, you know, he was so great on the, you know, when he did pass, everyone was like, oh, you know, telling stories and like the birdisms. And so one of my favorites is like if you go on the website, it tells you all these things you could learn about the plants and how deer rated they are, how they interact with fire, where they grow in
miss him.
communities, right? So it was really great. But he had descriptions of plants, and so I'm looking at one, and it's like Lamus condensatus, this giant wild ryegrass. He's like, hey, this grass looks really great, but if you overwater it, it looks like something that a beanbag that a fat person sat on. And so it's like, that's his official description of the plant. And so, you had to love him. Probably was. And
his comments, you just find his comments on irrigation in his website. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wish that I could just clone him just to be at like our RAC Water Resource Advisory Committee boards. If I could have him, oh my God, I would.
Yeah, that's like my friend Fred Collins. He would really show people. You got to stand up to things. That's what the uncles are good for at those points. The aunties too. But I think that with Bert, it was really something that you really couldn't do without, like I would go around the state and I got involved with other botanists in the Bay or other, kind of industry people and restoration. And they would be like, oh, Bert Wilson, that guy's such a obvious, this, that. It's like, he was a mad scientist kind of guy. And he was really someone who, I admired all his knowledge and what he could put into something, because unless you had that much time in or understood it enough, you didn't really know what he was talking about. No. But he introduced so many great plants, him and Celeste and Penny. They've done a great job.
Up north that was put on, it was a restoration done by Caltrans.
Okay.
And I ended up meeting one of the supervisors that was on that. And this is years ago.
Sure.
Long time. And he was like, hey, Mel, aren't you from San Luis Obispo County? And I'm like, yeah, I'm from Templeton. And he goes, well, all these plants came from somewhere around there too. And he goes, it was a nursery in like Santa Margarita. I'm like, Las Politas. And he's like, yeah. He goes, look, those are all from that area. Those, we won't talk about where those came from. And I was laughing because everything was like, these are like 20, 25 years old kind of thing, plantings. Mm-hmm. Planted at the same time, just different nurseries, right? It's different species to the characteristic of what they were trying to restore. Everything of Bert's was perfectly done. Yeah. And just so well established, did exactly what it needed to do.
Yeah, he knew the chemistry well. He knew the plants well. Yeah.
This one wasn't. And it was like, and he was like, that's from your area. Like, and I'm like, but you understand, I respect and love the fact that you're pointing out that that's from my area, but that's not just about my area. That's because of the person who grew the
culture.
Plants.
Like plants. You said, I think, that's a beautiful thing, being of somewhere. And that's one of the biggest things I've really learned from all of my Indigenous friends, of just like, this is our place. Yeah. Like, where do we go shopping? We go to the woods, we go to the creek, we go to the beach. This is where we get all the things that we need. This place gives us what we want. And I think if we had that base, then we put agriculture on top of it, things that were growing from other continents and places. And then we have high tech on top of it to ship and move things around. How do we lose? How do we have people starving and not eating well? And especially in a place that everyone wants to tout as the greatest, place on earth. So, there's a lot to look in the mirror. And I think, like you said, if everybody started putting in more time and effort instead of less, we would get somewhere. And I think a lot of these conveniences and just us animals, taking to luxury, that's just what happens. You start feeding a wild animal, they start coming back and want the easy meal. And I think somehow we got to look at it as not difficult, but just culturally rich.
Yep.
To be able to do things together. That's what I really love about, working with so many people from other places, especially all my Latino friends who work with me, over the years. And they're like, oh, my mom, when we're sick, she would just go to the garden and get something out for us.
That's all
like how is that poor? Yeah. That's someone who has a rich knowledge. And so, I have friends that teach herb schools here, and there's just like, she can't even fill up her classes fast enough. Every year she's graduating dozens of people to really have a great learning and understanding of preparing things. I can't even look at weeds the same anymore because it's like,
not a weed.
Yeah. You're like, wow, look at all that tea. Look at all that, salad. Look at all that pesto, nettle. So I think there's so many great things that really are, simple. Mm-hmm. And that's what so many other cultures, like, that's kind of like the secret to life. It's sort of like, how do you really, appreciate where you're from or what you have. Exactly. And that's what grandmas are for. Grandmas are there. Like you said, your grandmas are teaching you that. My whole family loves our Italian heritage because my grandma was a little,
my grandma turned 90,
matriarch of it all.
90 last week, and it's so crazy to think.
I'm glad she's still here. That's great.
Yeah, I don't have my mom, but I have my grandma. Yeah. How blessed am I? And and my tia, my aunt. And so I'm so incredibly blessed. And and she's incredibly, she still works at the Black Oak Motel, by the way. And so I asked her if she got her resignation papers, and she started laughing. She's like, nope, they're going to keep me for a little longer, and I'm laughing because she still drives. But the knowledge that she shares, not only with me, but with my children and my nieces and my nephew and my cousins,
is powerful.
I have her sister too, they're close in age, but I can't remember the distance. You should have seen the two of them on Saturday. We had a little party for her, and just to reflect on the fact of they're all from here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they've been here the whole entire time. It was funny because one of my cousins was saying, hey, Ramona, didn't you guys used to have to take the bus to San Luis? Like and we were laughing because she's like, no, it's just because we didn't like to drive over the grade. We were afraid to drive. So we didn't drive. So we took the bus, and they started asking, how did you afford that? And they're like, because it was it was a quarter. Like, and we just, and I was just like laughing about how long ago that was and the knowledge that they have. And I'm excited to always share. I have tons of stories that I retain, write down and share, but we are at this, you and I can go forever. And I love that about our connection and our time, but we all have to respect time, right? We have to respect time because we are all running out of it in order to conquer everything that we all want to do. So speaking of time, I have one announcement. I have the Templeton Library fundraiser does a little flea market, and that is the first Saturday of every month. Nature's Touch and Creston Valley will be there. I'm excited because some flowers, peonies that I helped plant, the new owner and I are going to be together at this market selling her peonies. These were done by the previous owner with me. So I'm excited to be able to help sell these plants, these cut flowers. So come out and see what we have there. I'll have some obviously at the store too, but I want to support the Templeton Library. It's kind of a fun community center that we have created. It's not just necessarily only about the library. It's about a gathering space and knowledge to carry on knowledge. So come out, support our little Templeton Library fundraiser. This Saturday, it starts at 8. Or I'm actually setting. I'll be there at 8. So come out and I think it goes
hit the farmers market, hit the library, all the highlights,
and then Nature's Touch. Go get some ice cream at
I need some fruit trees. I was going to talk to you.
Limited because of the season. Yeah. But we have some choices still left. But yes, ice cream though. Don't forget about our ice cream.
That sounds great.
Lemon mascarpone. You got to come and try the ice cream. So, any announcements that you have going on?
I'm sorry, everyone. I can't remember anything that's coming up, but I'm sure there's going to be great things. And we want to do a lot more classes, and there's a few spaces I'm working with that are to be coming soon. So
exciting.
I'll leave it in that realm.
You can always come up North County and do it Nature's Touch.
Hey, I will come hang out with you again.
Let's do it.
I watched those videos. That was fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. So I am super excited to see the possibilities. Thank you, Miguel. Reach out. There's my cell phone. You want to be a guest with Josh and I and Miguel, come and join us here in the studio in Paso Robles. You have a topic, you have questions, you can reach out to any of us on social media as well. Stay tuned to a lot more because, I have a lot more to share, but only limited time on this podcast. So we will have all of this up soon on social media. Reach out. You guys have a really good week. Take care.
Okay. Next time.